So far we've learned about margin, padding, position, and a few other CSS properties. But before we move on, we need to take some time to learn about color. There are several color models that you can use in your CSS, and even more that you can use in browsers that offer support for CSS3. For now, let's just focus on 3 color models. Now, as you can see here, I've created a blank web page, and let's switch over to the text editor so that you can see just the basic markup that we have here, and we've also created just some basic CSS just to kind of bootstrap the page. And this is the CSS file that we'll be doing our styling in. In these examples, I'm going to be using the background color property, which I'll talk more about in an upcoming video. For now, just know that it allows us to change the background color of an element. Now, first up are color keywords. By simply typing out a color keyword, you can use that color. These are all preset, of course, so if you type in something like gray, so let's first select our element, my div, and we'll say gray, and if we switch over to our browser and refresh, you can see that our div is now gray. If we type in gray, it's only going to give us a single shade of gray. And if we were to type in something like red, it's just going to give us one color red, and so on. However, there's a huge number of these color keywords. The CSS spec only specifies 17 of them, but most browsers support many others, sometimes numbering in the hundreds. These color keywords are somewhat handy. Sometimes if you need to set a color quickly for testing purposes, the easiest thing to do is just type out a word like blue. These are crude tools for professional design work though. We need something more precise. So next up is RGB. Contrary to what you might think, this one isn't terribly common either. It's just as precise as the third method I'll show you, but RGB never really caught on amongst web designers. But let's try it out anyway. So instead of red here, I'm just going to type out RGB. And I'm going to give it a few values, which I'll explain in a second. And if we switch back to the browser and refresh, you can see that we have a nice bright green color. So let's go back to the text editor. With the RGB color model, you specify colors in terms of a mixture between red, green, and blue in that order. So red, green, and blue. With this mixture of additive color, you can create a huge variety of other colors. In this example, I've maxed out the green, 255 is the maximum, and I've left the red and blue at 0. You should note that this value doesn't quite look like any other value that we've seen so far. When you see a word or a set of letters like this, followed by opening and closing parentheses, it's typically referred to as a function or a method. The values we pass to the function are called arguments and modify the function's behavior. If we were to pass different numbers, we would get different colors. Finally, there's hexadecimal colors. If you're not familiar with hexadecimal values, they're simply a base 16 numbering system as opposed to our normal base 10 numbering. When you count in hexadecimal, you go from 0 to 9 for the first 10 numbers, and then the next 6 numbers are the letters A through F. So the first 16 numbers in hex would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. This might sound extremely confusing at first, but it's a very important concept to understand. When typing out hexadecimal colors, we use a hash sign followed by 6 values. Let's try typing out a solid blue color. So we'll just delete what we have here and type hash. And we'll type in a bright blue. And when we switch back to the browser and refresh, you can see that we now have a bright blue color. So let's go back to the text editor. The hash sign here simply indicates that the characters that follow are a hex color value. The colors are broken into 3 groups, just like RGB. The first 2 characters are for red, the next 2 characters are for green, and the last 2 characters, FF in this case, are for blue. The color I've created here has no red and no green. those values are set to 0. The last set of numbers, blue, is at the maximum setting of FF. Let's try another example. Let's say that I wanted to create orange. In RGB color space, orange is created by mixing red with a bit of green. So we'll just type out FF9900. So we've set it to the maximum setting for red with a little bit of green and no blue. So when we save that out and switch back to the browser, you can see that we now have a nice orange color. So let's switch back to the text editor. There's also a shorthand for hex colors. If you have a case like this where the RGB colors each have two values that are exactly the same, we could shorten it to just F, 9, and 0. This will work exactly the same, and the browser will automatically expand this out on its own. Creating colors using hexadecimal values is a core competency in CSS, and we'll be using hex colors in upcoming videos. If you don't have a solid grasp on this yet, make sure you experiment with this for a while and familiarize yourself with how hexadecimal colors work. Now that you know how colors work in CSS, we can start using them. Over the next several videos, we'll be using color periodically to liven up our pages.